right. I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting. Is that what we have going on? Is that budget session? Okay, so we'll go with that. I'd like to open up the Finance/budget meeting. If there's no questions or anything to start us off, I'd like to turn over to Dr. Levine for a presentation, I believe.
So beginning with the substance abuse counselor, I just want to once again state that the substance abuse counselor's salary will be paid for by Medicaid reimbursement and will actually become a staff member of the high school health clinic. I'd like to thank Maggie Brennan, the executive director of the health clinic organization. I'd like to thank Sharon Cameron, our health director for the city of Peabody, and Allison Kilcoyne, who runs our health clinic for us at the high school, for working together with me, and of course DA John Blodgett, who has granted us $17,000. Had got that phone call this morning, and we are going to be able to use that money to reinvent what was the old school store and make that a substance abuse counselor room, fully equipped with soundproofing, nice shades and blinds, nice new equipment, and that will be a room where kids will be able to go quietly and independently to work with the new substance abuse counselor. So we are working together. We will be working together to develop a job description and then go about the business of hiring that person. So we're pretty excited about that. Building access attendant, or BAT. This is the person who will sit in the front lobby at the desk of the new middle school. We do have a job description ready to go. I will have that ready for you at the next school committee meeting, assuming that you approve this position. This is the person who will be doing a lot of security for the middle school as people come into the building. We'll be swiping licenses, we'll be giving IDs, and we'll be working with the security team at the middle school in a variety of different ways. Technology specialist. At $60,000, as I have said, we will be adding about 2,000 machines next year. We will be adding machines throughout the middle school. We will be adding machines at the high school in the 9th grade in a one-to-one capacity, and we will be adding machines in every grade 4 and 5 throughout the district. We certainly cannot be about the business of adding thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of machines and not continue to hire technicians to take care of them. We need at least one more technician, and that is this person. Teacher of the deaf, we simply have the student and students that need this service. Therapeutic program, we're pretty full in the therapeutic program. We know that next year we are going to need more space. If we don't have the space, we have to send the kids out. Some of the therapeutic program type kids can cost us, by sending them out, $80,000 to $150,000 a year. By creating space within our own school, where we do have room at the west, by expanding this program, we will expand our space capacity by 12 students, I believe, which is a significant savings for us and the right thing to do. CODA, we simply need the services. Culinary will be a new position at the middle school. Todd is very excited about this, and I was at the middle school and saw the room availability and the equipment that's going to be in there. The kids are going to get a great experience down there. It will be a wonderful feeder program for the high school as well. These kids are going to have a great experience in culinary at the middle school. And school adjustment counselor, I believe that the school adjustment counselor will be paid for by a restructuring of the Eagles program. We will be able to use the money from one of the teachers at the Eagles program that we will no longer need, and switch that money over to a school adjustment counselor that we will use throughout the district, kind of as a free agent. We often are in a position during the year where schools that don't have a school adjustment counselor on site have a crisis and we have nobody to send there. This will be the person that we will be able to send to schools in crisis. So we're very excited about that as well. The total of $330,000 added to the 2.79 comes to $3.12 million. And next slide, please. The B list would be the cluster at the middle school. You can cross out the $400,000 and put $200,000. We believe that Todd has gotten this down to a $200,000 request. What this would do, a new cluster at the middle school, it would lower the class sizes at the 8th grade. Now, he can live without it this year. That's why it's at the top of the B list and not on the A list. I simply have had trouble finding the $200,000 in next year's money, and because he can live without it for 1 year, I do believe he'll need it next year, but I do believe he can live without it for 1 year. So I would love to find the money for it, but at this point, I haven't been able to do so. Athletic transportation is always shy at the end of the year. We cobble the money together in various different places. K through 2 Pathways program would be higher up on the list, might even be in the A list if we had space for it. We haven't been able to identify space for it. One of the things that I'll be talking to the mayor about some ideas on how to open up space for our special ed programs in various different places throughout the schools. We should be developing new programs, and this is one of them, but we don't have any room for it right now. We know that we're going to need paras through the year. We will probably put this on the A list at some time in September, October, November, because we simply will have kids that need a para through the IEP process. But right now we're putting it on the B list, and we'll have high hopes that we won't have needs for it. Elementary teachers, we're working closely with all of the principals, as we will all summer, regarding class sizes. We have some class sizes that are on the borderline now. We're going to do a lot of work with open enrollments. There may be some open enrollment people in the lower grades that have to go back to their home schools because of class sizes. You may be getting some phone calls with upset parents because of that. But my feeling is that anybody in grades K1 and 2 can and should go back to their home schools if, by keeping them there, it will cost the district another teacher. Grades 3, 4, and 5, I think that if they've been in the school 4 years or more, that they deserve to stay there and finish their career there. So we take a very hard look at open enrollments, and parents and families understand the language of open enrollment, that they may be subject to going back to their home schools. This year there may be a few more than usual. I'll be working with all of the principals regarding this issue. And by the way, this does impact the eastern side of the city much more so than it does the western side of the city because of the class size issue. We could use a social worker at the Welch. There's just no question about it. We have families that are broken and hurting. We have kids that are broken and hurting because of it. We could use a social worker to reach out to families and work with families to provide wraparound services for both kids and families. We don't have a lot of that capacity right now. The Welch could certainly use it. All of our schools could use it, but the Welch could use it right now more than any other school in the district. It's on the B list, probably should be on the A list, but its time has come. It's a position of need, and I would advocate for it. If I had the money anywhere, I would certainly advocate for it. Next slide. The C list. At some point, this school committee and this mayor, long after I'm gone, is going to have to deal with some broader needs in the school district. The current structure of central administration is very thin. Because you have people that are willing to work into the evenings and on weekends doesn't mean that you don't need more help and more people at the top rungs of central administration. School systems like Revere, Everett, Malden, and Medford have at least 2 assistant superintendents, and at one time Revere had 3. We need help, quite frankly. A school system the size of Peabody with 6,000 students should have a K-12 director of curriculum and instruction. We should have an assistant SPED director. One SPED director cannot do all that's being asked of him or her in the capacity of all of the kids that we have in special education at this particular time. We need 2 transition coordinators. We particularly need a transition coordinator for ages 17 to 21. Kids who are with us beyond the high school years, who have special needs, who are going to go out into the work world or some world, and they're lacking the skills to do so. We should have a transition coordinator for those kids, and we do not. And we should have a transition coordinator from the Brown to the middle school, because we have so many special education programs at the Brown. Before these kids go to the middle school, they should be transitioned, and we just don't have the personnel to do so. So that's $310,000 of money that we don't have, but those are certainly positions of high need in the district. Next. So with the mayor's infusion of $1.85 million, the offsets of what we consider to be high out, low in, the health insurance that we're hoping a more realistic number of $180,000 savings, Higgins Energy savings of $300,000, and remember that's a savings of about $450,000 minus $150,000 of increased electricity. Energy district-wide that we hope we will continue to save next year, and teachers at the high school, the numbers right now are telling us that we will save about $400,000 and some odd at the high school because of program cuts. We feel that we will be able to offset the deficit number of $3,515,000, which puts us to the good with a very optimistic projection by about $100 and some odd thousand. And you know that that will be eaten up by the first person that we send out in special ed that we didn't figure on. So that's basically where we are. Those are the projections that I am giving you for a very thin budget next year. Those are my priorities on the ABC list. For those of you that were here in 2011, you saw an ABC list and a very similar presentation in 2011. And with that, I will stop and turn it back over to the school committee and the mayor for suggestions and recommendations. Actually, it's not suggestions and recommendations, it's your budget. You tell me what to do.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Levine. Anybody have any questions or comments at this time? Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on the offsets with the high school teachers. Is that something we'll discuss when we get to the high school in the budget?
Yeah, well, yeah. It's, I can tell you right now, it's a couple of English teachers because of class sizes. It's a... Right now, we're not sure where the other two teachers will come from, but we know by the sign-ups and we're 2 runs into the schedule now that 4 teachers is a pretty guarded and conservative number of people that will be lost at the high school by number.
Thank you.
We're not sure exactly where the other 2 teachers are going to come from because the numbers fluctuate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Rosagnow?
On that same line, so there's not going to be program cuts. There's going to be teacher cuts, but really due to enrollment. There's not going to be any specific programs that are going to be lost.
That, I can't guarantee that. Programs will probably not be lost, Mr. Rossignol. They will probably be thinned more than lost. We thought we might be losing some programs in the home ec area, and they did a very good job at recruiting and explaining their program, and their program is now pretty solid. But there are some programs throughout the building that are pretty thin right now, and we're not sure how many sections we're going to have of them. I don't think anything will be lost. I think some will be thinned.
Through the chair, so I don't feel comfortable with losing programs. I understand the need and the fluctuation for teachers regarding enrollment. You know, you don't have the students, you don't have the position. But I don't want to see a program be cut if there's no need to. I don't want to make, I want to make sure that we're not erring on the side of cost savings versus educational need.
Yeah, that won't happen. And you'll have a final bite at the apple on all of that.
Thank you. So I guess I'll keep going if that's okay with the chair. I know through your B list, the Higgins Middle School cluster was top on the list, and you're saying that we can get away with it. In my line of thinking, I would actually like to move the greeter, the middle school position that you're speaking of, into that B list, kind of along the same lines. Where it's a brand new building, I want to see how operational he can make it before we start adding staff that we may or may not need. I know that currently there are 3 secretaries in the office. I know at the high school, before we had a security officer, we had teachers manning the front, and that maintained itself until we realized, okay, we need to do things in a different manner. I just don't want to put the cart before the horse in a position when we don't know if there's an absolute need for it until the building is up and running. So in my mind, the middle school greeter I'd like to see moved into the B list and something off of that list moved forward. And I'm just going to keep just saying my 2 cents, if that's okay.
Mr. Rosignol, could I ask just one question before you go back to Dr. Levine? Dr. Levine, so right now, under your proposal, the proposed budget, you've given us the FY 2017 budget of over 70,311,793. That includes all your A items?
That's correct.
Okay, so that includes all the A at this point. Okay, so thank you. I just want to make sure. Mr. Rosignol?
That is just a minus. It includes the substance abuse counselor, but not the $80,000 because that's moved to the health clinic. So actually, there's a floating $80,000 there. It's not included in that that total. That is correct. Yeah.
So on that line of thinking, if we got rid of the building access attendant, now we're at $100,000.
That is correct.
Okay.
We haven't got my number yet.
Well, that was actually going to be my next question. We're going off of a proposal that the superintendent has given us with the mayor's additional funds being 1.85. Is that the number we're currently looking at?
Well, this was the proposal, and I go back to you after I can kind of go through my my talking points real quick, just so everybody knows where we stand. And I think as a group, certainly over the last few years, we've made a terrific and a tremendous investment in education in the city. I think all of us should be proud of that. The biggest one, obviously, is the new middle school, which is going to be, we're already planning, and I can speak to this a little later in the regular meeting, we're already planning some events for the Higgins, the transition to the new school. This year, our debt service went up over $500,000, in large part to the Higgins Middle School. This is, I believe, this year and next year will be the two high years for our debt service. And then it'll start to taper back a little bit. This is the high point for the Higgins being added. And of course, the vocational school is also a big expense in that debt service. In addition, this year, and I know there's some disagreement as to vocational school budget versus this budget, but it is a fact that the vocational school numbers went up 60 students this year. It went up from 160 to 222, give or take. That's 60 additional students, and it's over $1 million additional money that's going to the vocational school for our students over there. Also, in terms of the capital budget, we have going forward this summer to the City Council asking for a capital request. A significant amount of the capital request is for schools. I can kind of run through some of those that right now we have on the list. It still has to be tweaked a bit before the final list is presented to the council this summer. But there's a significant school investment in that capital request. We're going to be putting forward $120,000 for the new high school generator, which is necessary. We have the alternative high school relocation that's going to be taken up in the capital, the work that needs to be done to bring our alternative high school students over. We're going to be investing $48,000 in field house lighting, which we think will we'll be able to pay back in less than 3 years based on our energy expectations. But we'll be going to the LED lighting. We'll be doing a significant project for the D-house flooring, and the D-house, correct me if I'm wrong, is the modulars. So we're going to be doing a $65,000 project to do the D-house flooring. And then the Carroll School, there's going to be masonry work in waterproofing, which I know has been an issue that we've been dealing with for a number of years. Also, we have on the list right now is some events at the Welch School. We have the food service equipment that's going to be upgraded, some refrigerators and other costs. We have the digital records that we're looking at that would be a shared expense between city and school, but both city and school side need to digitize many records across the board. And the two big items, though, are the investment in technology, approximately $240,000, which will be to implement our one-to-one ninth grade Chromebook initiative. We will be able to have a Chromebook cart in every 4th and 5th grade classroom. We're going to expand the broadband capacity at Peabody High School to allow for the one-on-one technology that hopefully we'll have at all our students and our POS system. So approximately $240,000 to go towards technology in the capital request. And the big one is the science K through 10 adoption, which is $525,000. Rather than putting that on our budget, which quite frankly, many of these items typically would be in our regular operating budget, I want to put those towards the capital to allow us the opportunity to make some additions that Dr. Levine has outlined. With that, I'm willing to go, taking all that into account, I'm willing to go to 1.75 at this point to try to make this work, to give us the opportunity to, again, add to the budget with some important positions and some additional upgrades that Dr. Levine has outlined. I definitely have some opinions on items A, B, and C, but I can, as to what my priorities would be, but I know that all of you have some different thoughts on that. So kind of, that'll give you kind of a sense of where I'm at with the budget. Mr. Rossignol, the floor is still yours if you want it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if where you had addressed capital improvement, one of the things...
I'm sorry, one other thing I failed to mention too was a project at the auditorium. A significant project at the high school auditorium would also be part of the capital request. Just to make sure I'm not missing anything else. The upper field is a potential project. That hasn't been decided just yet, but that needs some further discussion. But there might be a couple of other projects, one at the upper field and then one in the gymnasium. So anyway, I'm sorry, Mr. Rossignol, I just wanted to make sure that yep, I think that's where we stand for capital right now.
All set? Okay. One question regarding the capital improvement plan proposed by Dr. Levine. I know that your vision is to basically start in the middle school and kind of work outwards, more or less. I guess the question I have is, what is the rationale between doing 4th and 5th versus 10 and 11 as far as improving technology?
I'd feel more comfortable if Chris were here to answer that question, but I believe that in the overall tech plan, adding to 4 and 5 at the elementary schools was the next step. Going to grade 9 in the one-to-one tech, so that the kids going from 6 to 8 this year and grade 9 next year would then be 9 and 10 next year, and no, but the following year would be 9 and 10, so that it would be added each year, one grade a year for 4 years. I believe that's the tech plan, so that everybody gets a piece of the pie with the money that's available.
Do you envision grades 10, 11, and 12 next year being bring your own device or something along those lines to make sure that those kids aren't left out in the dark as far as technology goes?
Kara, do you have an answer to that?
No, but they will not go they will not bring their own device. However, they will have the carts will be more in those sections of 10, 11, 12 because grade 9 will not need them because they'll have one-to-one. So that's what we're going to really focus on, so they will not be left behind.
They'll also have the expanded bandwidth at the high school, so that whatever is available at the high school will be, there won't be any dead spots. And Eric will be here tonight to make a presentation, so you could also ask him to fill in the holes.
My one fear is, so you have your ninth graders moving to a one-to-one device, which I think is fantastic. You have that basically moving forward from that grade level down, but you're missing capturing 10, 11, and 12 currently. And my fear is those students won't, even though we have increased bandwidth, they don't have the opportunity to continue on that same pattern that ninth all the way down to fourth will have.
What I can do, Tom, is find out what that would cost us by grade. And there's also E-rate that figures into that. So let me find out what that would cost us and come back at the next budget meeting with a cost projection.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you. And just another question regarding the B lists. You have paras, you have elementary school teachers, both in the middle of the B list. Whether we want to vote for them or not, whether they're on the B list or C list, if the need arises, we're going to have to fund those positions regardless.
That is correct.
So I guess my question is let's say we don't fund anything else from the A list, we keep it as is, there's still a potential of $250,000 of an anticipated cost that we may incur next year, including, and also on top of that is the $25,000 in the athletic transportation, which we end up doing every year. So, I mean, those three numbers right there, my fear is if they're not at least identified and we're not aware of them, they still could be potential costs regardless of what we're planning on doing in our A list.
When I was here in 2011, did that over the summer. It just happens. So you do what you have to do in order to make sure kids are going to be serviced. I even did that this summer. I added a grade 5 teacher at the Welch because the population exploded over the summer and the demographics was really bad to keep that class together. So I just added a grade 5 teacher because I had to. It wasn't budgeted. You're right, Tom. We do what we have to do, and to make it work, that becomes a priority over the summer to make sure that class sizes are reasonable, and you find the money, and you know we do. So and we take a look when it comes time to. In the summer, we look at that almost every day as a group, along with Mary Ellen, and we need to do a lot of work on open enrollment this year, which we didn't pay a lot of attention to in the past because we didn't need to. This year we have to. So,
through the chair, on that point, I would hate to see an open enrollment student who's our own student just choosing a different school for whatever reason for the parents of Peabody be bumped back to their home school for a school choice student. And I know we're going to...
That won't happen.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's not going to occur.
No.
I know when we initially voted for school choice a number of years ago, we did it expecting and knowing that we were going to have an influx of students, which was fantastic, but we wanted to make sure we controlled where those students went. And somehow we lost our track there as well, because we have students being accepted at, let's say, the center school, for instance, where we already know that we're overpopulated.
Right.
So when we take school choice students in, I also want to make sure that that is also, I absolutely welcome any student that wants to choose our schools, but we just have to make sure that we're placing them and that the parents are aware that it may not be the exact school they want, but it's the same programming that they want.
It also may be that they don't stay at that school if the population increase. They have to be the first ones that we look at before open enrollment kids. And we've already had that discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
By the way, school choice, we're going to put an absolute scrunch on accepting any school choice kids at grades 4 or 5 anywhere in the district, because eventually they feed into the middle school, and I think that we need to see what happens with our middle school kids now that we open the new school, because I have a feeling that people are going to move in and want to access the middle school. So I think that we're not going to accept any school choice kids in grades 4 or 5.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rossignol. Any other comments, Mr. Miko?
Through the chair to Mr. Rosenthal, I just wanted some clarification. When you spoke about grades 4 and 5, so instead of grades 4 and 5, moving that technology fund to grades 9 and 10?
Through the chair, I was just wondering the thought process. Okay. Was it, you want your 5th graders to get used to Chromebooks because they're going to be moving into the Higgins, and that's a perfectly acceptable rationale. But where we're increasing the bandwidth at the high school and we're getting one-to-ones for 9th graders, I just didn't want to see the 10, 11, and 12th graders missing out on the technology piece that we're trying to institute so greatly. So it wasn't really an either-or question. It was more or less trying to wrap my head around the rationale of why we're going down instead of going up.
Okay. Thank you.
By the way, I think you stated a great answer to your own question. Getting the kids used to the Chromebooks at the middle school that will be throughout the middle school. But also, there's a simple answer as far as funding is concerned. There's a limit to what we can do in any one given year. And this is a particularly bad year.
I'm sorry, through the chair, that was why my original question was, are we looking at bring your own devices for the older grades? Because that would at least accommodate a teacher's wish or want to use the increased bandwidth and to use the same technology that the one-to-one devices that we're going to implement for the 9th grade, allow the upperclassmen, if you will, the ability to access the same material in a controlled environment. So that was my thinking, is now it's not costing us anything, but they're still getting the same benefit from the technology.
Yeah, I hope you ask Eric that question and see whether or not he's still standing afterwards.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Miko, you still have the floor. Yeah.
Through the chair, maybe to Dr. Levine. Just to be clear, that grade 4 and 5 proposal, that's not is that a one-to-one?
No, those are Chromebook carts.
Carts, okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify
In
that.
each grade 4 and 5 classroom.
Okay, thank you.
Say it.
The 4th and 5th grade would have centers. So they would have 4 or 5 Chromebooks in their classrooms for center-based, project-based learning. And they'll have more carts at the high school for the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. That's what I'm trying to get at. Those Chromebook carts will be more for 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. The carts that are currently there will be for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students.
So if I may, just for clarification, so the 9th grade current carts you're saying would be transitioned to the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade?
Correct, and they also have the 4 labs. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you. Just a, I don't know, suggestion or a question. My understanding first was 4th and 5th, it was for equity, so that across the entire system, all the 4th and 5th grade classes would have access to a larger number of the Chromebook carts, which actually helps because then it frees up the current cart for K to 3. And of course, it's the same thing at the high school. But when we implement the one-to-one for the 9th grade, well, actually at the Higgins as well, how is that going to happen? Do we retain ownership, or are people going to be buying these or leasing these?
So our plan is for a 4-year lease. Mm-hmm. And then when the kids walk out in the senior year, they take it with them, because it basically will have lost almost all of its value, so that on a rotating basis, kids will come in the 9th grade and leave with that same unit in the 12th grade and take it with them. We will have an insurance program at the middle school. We will insure it, right, at the school. And in the high school, it will be self-insure. It'll be a self-insurance program. The insurance programs are pretty reasonable. We're in the process of exploring different options, and that will ensure breakage, loss, et cetera. So we're pretty far down the road on that, but that's the way it'll work.
Okay. But the reason that I ask that is because at the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, if it is a lease program where families are actually going to be paying for that device, 9th grade is mandatory basically so that you have the full 9th grade covered. Is this something that could be optional for people who choose it at the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade? Is that anything that...
Actually, they're not going to be paying for the device. They're only going to be paying for the insurance. We pay for the device.
Oh, okay. In that case, is it something where we could allow people to, for the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, to lease the equipment if they so chose? We wouldn't be providing it, but they would there be any type of program where they would be able to obtain that equipment, have access to it, and that would bring the 10th, 11th, and 10, 11, and 12 on a little quicker, but it wouldn't impact on our budget?
I don't know the answer to that, but we could find out. That's a good question.
Because that way, if they're preparing to, especially for people preparing to go off to college or any type of higher education, then they may look at it with that in mind as far as being able to get that equipment a little earlier.
That's a good question. We'll find that out.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask Superintendent or Mr. Jack, I'm just trying to, I'm having trouble figuring out the numbers here, and I can't quite get to the number you have in terms of, I want to walk through it, if we could, just slowly, the big numbers. Right now, if we go to the first page, the FY 2016 budget is $68,461,793. The increases that you've proposed on the next page is $2,790,000 plus in the next list, the A list. If we took that full 330, that would put us total between the addition, all the additions you've outlined would be $3,120,000. So I'm taking the $68 million that was the 2016 budget, adding the $3,120,000, and I get $71,581,793. And then the request would be for 1.85 in additional money, and then the savings that you've outlined, the offsets, total $1,665,000. That's $3,515,000 in additional money coming in. The request would be for $3,120,000. I'm just having trouble figuring out. I feel like I'm missing $300,000.
We'll find it.
Does that make any sense? I'm not sure if I explained that well, but I'm just trying. I'm having trouble. No, I'm not counting list B or list C. So I'm just counting the additions.
The additions. The A list?
I'm counting the incurred debt, the $2,790,000.
Yeah.
Plus the 330 which I believe covers all the A-list. Comes to 3,120,000. I have that as being the additions to the budget. Then the question is, how do we get there? And we get there through the additional money that the city puts forward, which the request is for 1.85. The other way we get there is through offsets, which I think is a couple pages down. Kara, if you could go to that. The offsets are a total of 3,515,000.
I don't think the objective is to balance, because I think that there are more offsets than there are requests for money.
Correct.
So that there should be more money in offsets than there are in expenditures.
Yes. Okay. So that's what we're.
That's the objective, is
okay.
to leave some play. The money, the bottom line should not add up to equal. The bottom line is there should be more money in offsets than there is in expenditure. Because we can't go into a budget at zero. We have to have some play.
That explains that then. Because I was off a little bit of money, and all right. So
We can't spend everything down to zero. If we do that, then we have no money to hire teachers and stuff. Then we have no money to put a special ed kid in a tuition. We have to have some play. So I didn't spend everything that I accounted for in offsets. That A-list does not account for every dollar that I have offset in the budget. There is still some money left over to play with.
I just wanted to make sure I understood how we got to those numbers, and they weren't matching to me, but I understand. Okay. Wait a minute, I don't know about that. Mrs. Dunn, it's with you. Are you all set? Great. Mr. Olympio?
Through the chair. Dr. Levine, what did we start the year in as far as debt? Like, what was the starting point?
Well, I mean, legitimately, when I walked in on July 1st and started to look through the budget, there was some, and I think I shared this with you, there was some structural issues. One was if I look back over 5 years, there were, in the substitute line, there were 4 years, 3 years plus this year, of regular high expenditures in the substitute line, really high. And then there was 1 year that was ridiculously low. David and I cannot figure it out. We don't know what happened. It was so low that it makes absolutely no sense at all. What happened this year was that a relatively low number was carried forward.
Okay.
We knew that by the end of this year, we would be far exceeding that number. We're probably $250,000 beyond that number right now. So structurally, I knew I was assuming a $250,000 deficit walking in on July 1.
Okay.
Because I knew that now I would be $250,000 in the hole if the history held up, with the exception of that 1 year last year.
Okay.
And indeed it did. It did hold up.
Okay.
We knew that we were incurring a $165,000 deficit at least from the 9 C cuts from last year that carried forward to this year because they planned a budget for circuit breaker reimbursement that was $165,000 more than what we actually got.
Okay.
So we're at about $400,000 deficit again that I knew on July 1, and we continued to incur debt as the year progressed with every special ed placement that went out that we didn't budget for, which is now over $1 million. With some special ed placements that go out, you incur debt in transportation that you didn't budget for.
Right.
Because some kids are in private placements that demand that you also add transportation as well. So between the tuition and the transportation, we're probably well over $1 million in that venue right now. So I had thrown around a number that I thought by the end of the year we would be about $1.8 million in deficit, and that's, I think, where we are. On the other hand, Working with David all year, we shut the budget down in January. And we really only allowed expenditures, number one, either that we had to allow, or number two, that made sense because they impacted kids' learning. Literacy books that were counted on for this time of year, for example. If a computer could wait until July 1, we would say, wait until July 1. If something else could wait until the new budget, July 1, we said wait until July 1. So we were picking and choosing what we would allow to go forward. And when you do that, by that very nature, people slow down on what they ask for. That combination of closing the budget down in January and some good luck, warm weather, no snow, energy costs staying down, doing some careful manipulation of the budget in the way that where we put grant monies and how we use grant monies, we think that by June 30th we will be close to making up all of that deficit and not have to go to City Council and ask for a supplemental. That's our aim, that's our objective. But we're going to start with that deficit next year. We know that we will have a structural deficit next year, similar, because we now have to fund those monies that weren't funded last year, this year.
Right.
We've got to fund that. We've got to find the money for next year's budget, which we will, but it puts us in a hole. So we have to be very careful. What I've asked for here in $330,000 of additions is when you figure it out percentage-wise in $70 million budget, I'll use my famous word, Mr. Mayor, it's peanuts. When you think about it, percentage-wise, it's really peanuts. I should be asking for triple this to move forward. But it's just a bad budget year, and we all got to work together to keep it down. I can't thank the mayor enough for what he has done in his magic in moving so many of the items that we need into his capital plan. We could never move forward with what we were going to be able to do if the mayor had not agreed to move many of our requests into the capital plan. I mean, 80% of what he's asking for is school-related,
Right.
which is unbelievable. So we are very lucky to be able to do the things that we're doing, but just because we're going to start the year with what I project to be a $300,000
Cushion.
buffer, that'll be eaten up when we open school in September.
And will we know the circuit breaker figure, what, in July? Is that usually?
Yeah, we'll know it. When will we know it?
You'll have the actual circuit breaker before, hopefully before this budget is finished.
Okay.
The money that be coming forward. The issue becomes at this time of year is the governor reviews their revenues,
Yep.
and it's predicated on that, and that's when the 9C cuts come
Yep.
in to play. And it's usually at a disadvantage for an organization or an organization like the city of Peabody, simply because they usually have their budget finished and passed, and then all of a sudden the 9C cuts come into play, and the entities such as the schools end up having to go back into their budget and adjust, and that's what happened last year.
So, we'll know soon.
Okay.
But we're figuring better. We're more conservative in our approach.
And of that 800,000, is there any way that you could gauge, like, how many students does that represent? Is
I
there?
can tell you exactly if,
Yeah.
I could give you that number exactly. It's hard for me to say because some could be $50,000 or $60,000 placements at the consortium, and others could be $150,000 placements in a private
Okay.
tuition placement. So it's hard to say how many.
Yeah. I'm just trying to rack my brain there. Is there any way we can, in the future, predict, some kind of uncertainty? I mean, as best we
Actually,
can.
believe it or not, John, it's actually illegal to do that. The government discourages you from trying to predict kids who will be going out on special ed because they say that you're doing preconditioning And you can't, because, and they don't want you to do that. They don't want you to presuppose that a kid might go out to a tuition-based placement, for example, because you're pre-assuming that they're not going to make it in the main, in the school system. So you don't do that. You don't put those monies away. And financially, business managers would discourage you from putting aside $1 million and saying, this is what we need maybe in case of these placements. So we don't do it, and we pay the price for it later.
Yeah, well, it's a big surprise at the end of the year, and it's really
It's actually not a surprise.
yeah, just frustrating. But let's see, I had another question. Couple other things. Is on the B list as far as elementary school teachers, social workers. When you list those salaries, are those the base salary? Does that include all like the retirement, any payroll tax? Is that all of the overhead? Is that considered?
Yeah, the only thing that we have to consider is the base salary plus benefits.
Okay.
So we consider a medium cost for benefits plus a relatively low base salary.
Okay. Let's see. Then on the offsets, the high out, low in, the $450,000. What? Just a few examples of what line items are.
That's almost all teachers.
All teachers.
And it's high-end teachers that have been with us for 20, 30, 40 years, 25, 30, 35 years.
So that's separate from the high school teachers? Because
That's
it's separate.
all throughout the system.
Okay.
Those would be layoffs.
Okay.
These are retirements.
Okay.
These are people that have been with us for a long time. They're probably making in the $75,000 range. You add $15,000 to that for benefits. So that's a $90,000 retirement. If you get 10 of them, that's $900,000.
Right.
If you add back $500,000 for hiring at the lower end, that's a $400,000 savings. We happen to be in a year where we think we're going to have more than 10. We already have a number of high-end retirements that we have letters for. So in that respect, I don't mean to say it's a good year because we're losing high-quality veteran teachers that do a wonderful job for us in our classroom. But financially, in a bad financial year, this is actually a plus financially.
Okay. And then one last thing, I think we talked about this before, but I think what might really be helpful, going forward is, we have these spreadsheets, it's comparing budget to budget, but to see the actual amount that was expended, the current year expenditure versus the prior year expenditure, it'll just give, I think, people a better, at least myself, a better base of, what are we over fund, what are we over budgeting or under budgeting, the real specific items in dealing with reality. Where are the budget neutral transfers? Where do they keep coming, maybe on a year in and year out basis?
Yeah, and Mr. Olympio, our business manager actually said that's fairly easy to do.
Yeah.
And I think I'll have a conversation with our new
Yeah.
business manager and ask him to set that structure up. What I'm used to seeing actually is the amount of money that's expended, and then next to it, the amount of money that's left, and then next to that, the percent expended from that line item up to a certain point. And I think that we can do that.
Yeah,
and that would be a nice running total.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Hockman, then Mr. Amico.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thank you for including so many of our items in the capital improvements budget. I appreciate it. I think that those are all items that we desperately need here in Peabody, and I appreciate your recognition of that and pushing it forward on that agenda. I also appreciate your offer of $1.75 million as we sit here on May 10th, and I'm sure we'll have further conversations regarding that.
That was first offer, right?
So through you to, I don't know if is it Dr. Jack? No, Mr. Jack, I'm sorry. Or Dr. Levine, I'll go through your handout and then we'll talk a little bit about the budget as well, which is all in play, by the way. The entire budget's in play, not just the ABC list and other incurred debts and things like that. But with regard initially to the incurred debt page, you list raises at $1.5 million. And I know that we've come to settle with some of the bargaining units, and it's our hope and expectation to settle with the remaining bargaining units in the near future. Is the $1.5 million representative of retro payments as well as 16-17 payments?
That's inclusive of 2017. Does that include David, that includes the retro?
The 2017 takes into account, in particular since we settled with Unit A, what the retro would have been and then what the increase in 2017 would be. So that's part of the 1.5 million. So to answer your question, yes.
Okay. So with that, it's my understanding that in the 15-16 budget, we did allocate funds for an expectation as far as a agreement relative to increases in wages. So the shortfall in the 15-16 budget would it be greater than what we're looking at here?
Do you want me?
David, yep.
In the what you're looking at in 15-16, so to the point, when you put this budget together a year ago, you did not put into your budget in the 15-16 any expected increases. Those are yet to be funded. What you did put into place was the movement on step and track, allowing people to move up, but you did not put in what I would term a COLA. So that has to be, anytime we negotiate, that money still has to be added into the budget that exists today to increase that budget.
There's no question we have to pay what we're contractually obligated to pay.
So the retroactivity in 15-16, that has not been added. That calculation is there, but that amount of money has not been funded at this point.
Thank you. I was under the impression well, I'll just say that we had, in fact, earmarked funds for at least some of these raises in the 15-16 budget, but I'll leave that alone for tonight and look further at that. With regard to your A-list, Dr. Levine, I tend to agree with, if I can express an opinion on some of this stuff at this point, I tend to agree with Mr. Rosignol as far as the building access attendant. And in addition to that, I'm not quite sure about the culinary Higgins Middle School. I don't know if it was a consultant or professional. We do have a substantial food services department in the district. They provide for meals and food for students throughout the district. I don't understand, and maybe if you'd like to elaborate or explain as to why we would add to the food services specifically for the Higgins Middle School.
I think you're confusing two positions. The culinary teacher is actually part of the curriculum. That's a teacher who would be teaching kids. It's not part of the food services program. It's the same as the vocational culinary program at the high school. It would be an additional program. The consultant that we hired is simply an hourly basis to help improve the whole presentation and food product at the middle school that's working with our food service people. She's just a consultant and is only working on a one-year contract, and it's only by hour, and it's minimal. So that what is in the budget is actually a new teacher at the high school, at the middle school that Todd has been asking for. We do have the building facility that can handle this now. It's a beautiful facility. The kids, I think, are going to get a great experience from this new teacher.
Thank you for the explanation. I was aware that there was a consultant. I didn't realize in this A-list that we were talking about adding a staff member, a full-time staff member. And with that, I think I'd perhaps be more opposed to it at this point, without having the vocational director who we just hired in place and giving us a little bit of guidance as far as this. I appreciate Mr. Busey's opinion on the subject, but I'd like to hear quite a bit more about this prior to committing an additional position within the budget. Speaking about the budget, and I do think that there are some B-list priorities that I would move on to the A-list in place of some of the expenditures on the A list. I don't think one of them would certainly not be an additional Higgins Middle School cluster. I think even with the clusters that we have now, we fall well below the contract guidelines as far as what number of students are in each cluster. I was disappointed last year when we did reduce a cluster. We didn't reduce any expenditures. We shifted the teachers or the positions that were funded for a cluster into electives at the middle school, and I appreciate that enhances the curriculum there, but it didn't realize any cost savings, and I think we're at least a year or two away from the population that requires an additional cluster. That's my opinion, and I'm sure I'm in the minority on this board on that. But going to the budget itself, in tab 21, which is utilities, and I go to this tab initially because there's a significant offset that's expected in the smaller handout of $300,000, and this is a place that we typically go to creatively make numbers work, because the reality is if it is a colder winter or if utility prices increase, we're going to heat buildings. There's no question about that, and it's an area where there's some degree of manipulation, and it's common. It's not unique to this particular budget. But in addition to that, I note that line 419 for oil is zeroed out. Are we completely rid of oil burners in the school department? We are.
At this point,
Oh, well, good for us.
Yep.
Okay, well, good for us. That's good to know. It's good for the environment, and it looks like it's good for our energy costs as well. So I'm happy to hear that. I also note that there are some things in your, Dr. Levine, in your recommended lists A, B, and C that that aren't on your list A, B, and C that I'd like to see, and one in particular is a more realistic expenditure associated with substitute teachers. And I realize that substitute teachers' compensation is contained within the Unit A collective bargaining agreement, and we recently ratified that agreement without addressing substitute teachers, but the amount in which we're contractually paying substitute teachers is inadequate. It makes it difficult for your central administration. It makes it difficult for each of our building principals to attract substitutes when the need arises to, a teacher needs time for their whatever reasons that they need time. So I'd like to see a little more realistic line for that expenditure. And on top of that, I wouldn't mind to see some impact bargaining as far as the amount that we would actually compensate a substitute. I think it's time that we do that. So with that...
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are you talking about two different things? Are you talking about the daily rate for substitutes? And are you talking about the total in the line item for substitutes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Dr. Levine, yes, every year there's a shortfall in the substitute line because we don't fund it properly, and we realize that shortfall from other lines, and again, in a $70 million budget or a $68 million budget, that's expected, and Dr. Jack and Mr. Keniston, Mr. Jack and Mr. Keniston before him do a wonderful job at recovering funds from lines where they can, and I appreciate that. I'd just like to see just a more realistic amount placed in the line, both for what we currently spend and maybe an expression of what we should be spending.
Through the chair. Respectfully, we did a survey because it was my sense that we were underpaying substitutes as well in relation to surrounding cities and towns, and we found that we weren't. Surrounding cities and towns are paying $70 to $75 a day. We pay $75. We do pay $100 a day for substitutes who are certified teachers who have retired from Peabody. So we just don't have the money, in my opinion, to go up this year. I'd love to pay substitutes $100 a day. But we don't have the money to do that, first of all. And second of all, we're competitive with surrounding communities. There are some people that say that they will go to the one community that's at $80 a day, and I believe it's a private school that's at $80 a day. But for the most part, we're competitive with surrounding communities. Now, maybe they'll go up next year, I don't know. But right now, we're competitive. To the second point, if I make the substitute account more reflective of reality, something has to suffer. Don't know where I would take it from. And that would be a difficult discussion. So I take your point very well, and I can't dispute what you're saying. I just don't know where to go for it.
Mr. Amico, and then Mrs. Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Dr. Levine, and what Mr. Rosnell had said earlier about requesting to keep the programs and the potential, those two cuts at the high school. If they're non-renewals, I would hope that if we do have a cushion with some money left over, that we do keep those positions and not eliminate those two teaching positions. And secondly, going back to the Higgins, the building access attendant, I think for a $20,000 investment, I think it's a good one, because that person's going to act as a second set of eyes, or maybe the only set of eyes other than cameras at any given point. That's going to be that school's going to be a lot busier than it is now. It's going to be attractive not only to maybe sports programs wanting to rent out, or to who knows, maybe colleges, universities in the area that want to have classrooms. So I just think having that security, that building access attendant, to use what Dr. Levine said, it's really peanuts. So I'd really like to see that kept on the A list there, especially if they have a radio, and let's face it, vandalism can happen quickly, or any kind of security threat. I just like to have that person right at the front door that can get in touch with whether it's an administrator in the building, a custodian, or even the police right next door. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. I had a different question, but to that point, the building access attendant, is this beyond school hours?
No, it would be a person who would be swiping licenses in the machine, giving out IDs, sitting at the desk that accepts people as they walk into the building, being part of the security team, from what I understand, being part of the emergency management plan, and interacting with, when necessary, police, and when kids are not where they're supposed to be. So a variety of different responsibilities, but mostly in the security area, and primarily accepting visitors to the building.
Are any of these duties additional beyond the current practice that we use to access the door now?
Yeah, because we'll have that technology to swipe licenses and to give IDs based upon what comes up on that machine. So in that respect, yes.
I wasn't aware about the license swipe. What type of information will come from that?
Whether or not the, that's correct, right? Yeah, it tells us whether or not there's a criminal record.
So the person that's going to be sitting there will be accessing personal records. Will this person need to have some type of special training, or what? I mean, this is sensitive information.
Sure. Yeah, training will be provided, quarried, be a confidential type of position in that respect. I would assume it would be part of the paraprofessional union. And the job description is pretty much done, which will come to this table for approval if the position exists.
I'm not sure, but maybe at a later time, if we could just get a little bit more detailed, because I'm just wondering how the logistics of this is going to work. So every single person that enters that building is going to need to have a license or an ID to be swiped to get in? And if they do not, what will we do?
Yeah, the technology is there. I mean, the technology has been around for 10 years. These machines are very simple. You put your license into the machine, and the machine spits out whether or not you are a friendly or an unfriendly. And if you're an unfriendly, you're not allowed into the building.
Well, that sounds pretty good, but...
I would suggest that there are a couple of questions at least that only Todd could answer, and probably much better than I. We do have a second budget meeting scheduled. I would ask the committee that it might be appropriate for me to bring Todd to answer a couple of these questions.
Yes, so we'll move on from that and wait for Todd to come.
Sure.
My other point was, in regards to the overall budget, I think it's a very good budget. I know that there's some of us on this board that have never had the luxury of picking through A, B, C lists. We've had luxuries of reducing an A, B, C list. So these have been rather nice. One of my points that I'd like to make is during our school improvement plans, I think that this committee heard very loud and clear that a lot of our elementary schools were lacking in school adjustment counselors. I don't think any of them had full-time, and they all basically requested a full-time school adjustment counselor. So in my opinion, on the A list, I would like to see if we could possibly increase them and honor the request of what the principals had asked, their need for school adjustment counselors. And I'm hoping that at our next budget meeting, maybe we can have some revised lists based on the discussions that we had there. And I would personally like to see if we could add a few more in there. How many would we need to make everyone whole for all of the elementary schools that asked for them?
Well, we do have one full-time school adjustment counselor on the A list, and that will definitely happen with this budget. To make everybody whole, we have 8 elementary schools. We have 4 school adjustment counselors, 3.6 school adjustment counselors. This would make 4.6. We need a full-time, does that include a school adjustment counselor at the middle school? A full-time, okay, so just the elementary schools, 3.6. So we would need another 4.4. So we would need another 3.4 in addition to the one that I'm funding here. I would suggest that at best we could do that over 2 years, probably over 3, but at best we could do that over, in order to add 2 more adjustment counselors to this budget, that's another $160,000. The mayor has reduced the 1.5 to 1.85 to 1.75. So the $100,000 that we were going to save in the substance abuse counselor is now gone, the $80,000 plus 20. So we're even Steven there. So if you direct me to spend money out of the $300,000 buffer, I could do so, but we would be starting to creep to zero. That is your call.
So in that buffer, is that something you take into consideration when you go down into the B list for the paras and the elementary teachers?
It is.
Is it possible to wait till the very last minute on, say, a third school adjustment counselor until you figure out the elementary teachers, and then possibly hire a little bit into the school year?
It is. The only problem with that is that you limit the pool of candidates that are available, and you may wind up with somebody that somebody else discarded, for example. So the best time to hire is now, in the spring, And we are in the business of putting out an ad right now as in anticipated openings for a whole variety of positions that we now know are open because of retirements and people who are leaving, and we guess are opening because of these lists. We have put in the ad pending school committee budget approval so that we are not committed to anything until you actually approve a budget and tell me what it is that you're approving. But the answer is yes, we can wait, but we do put ourselves at a bit of a disadvantage because we're jumping into a pool late in the game by doing so. School adjustment counselors are eaten up pretty quickly.
One other question, on the high school teachers, the 435, on that number on the offsets, does that health insurance include those teachers from the 435? Does that include the health insurance reduction on that?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe at the next budget meeting, there'll somehow be a few more school adjustment counselors added into the A budget.
I get the message.
Thank you. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everybody thanked both of you for the budget, so I would like to do that as well, because right now the process is going very well. It really is. You haven't lived till you fought for an hour over the light bulb line. Don't want to go back to those days. No. All I'd like to bring up, and it is just information, it's on the two A-list items for the Higgins, specifically the building access attendant and the culinary teacher. My understanding for both of those positions were, when we designed the building, we knew we were going to need personnel for those two areas. And especially with the culinary at the middle school, that is now part of middle school curriculum, as I understand it. If you think back, I don't know at what level they stopped home economics, which was cooking, sewing, and it was before your time.
Home economics?
Home economics,
What the
yeah.
heck is home economics?
It was great. It was great. But that kind of fell by the wayside when, I honestly, I don't know when, over the last 40 years, but it has been included back in, and a lot of middle schools have been including culinary in their curriculum. So the school was designed to have the culinary room. I still call it the home ec room, but if you went into Higgins right now, and you may not be aware of it, we had a cooking classroom. Okay, all right, good. There, John knows, okay.
1984.
There we go, more current. And it really is a big part of the curriculum so that the students are learning life skills, really, at that age. So it was important that we staff it, because my understanding is it's almost required. Is that correct, Dr. Levine and Kara? I thought it was required at this point.
Oh, yeah, actually, there's an exploratory rotation that Kara has talked about that's going to be part of the curriculum. This would put a big hole in that exploratory rotation if we didn't have it.
And it is, yeah.
Speak into the microphone.
It's not a mandate, but it's going to be on the exploratory rotation, and I down the road, I foresee that.
Right. So that was just some information for all of you. The same thing with the building access attendant. The reason that is in there, and I, as we go forward, I will be advocating for that. That was because you're getting it now at the end of a very lengthy process of decisions that were made at the building committee level and also at the school level. When the building was designed, this was discussed on one of the safety subcommittees, about a safety subcommittee, to enhance the security at the front door. It will be different than what you currently see at Higgins right now. Part of it is going to be that equipment which can scan a license. So if someone had a restraining order and that had been entered into a system, it would pop up, and the person at the door would know that someone can't come in. Presently, the way that things work at Higgins now, you buzz, the secretary asks who's coming in, and they will say, come to the office. This is going to be right at the door. Someone may not be allowed into the building. They may not be coming into the building at all because of this added feature. So it's, there have been specific designs in the building to enhance that. One of the things is a very, very specific desk for the building attendant, and that will be placed at the entrance so that it will help. Another reason was because of it being a new building. When you come in the front door, we want to be able to make sure that people are directed straight to the hall, to the office, to the main office. And I'm giving you that just for informational purposes. I know Mr. Busey can give you more information.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Let's see, we have Mr. Rosignol.
Thank you. Through the chair to Dr. Levine. On page 8, I was looking at the ELL supervisor line, and in on the green budget. And in 2015, it was funded at 85,000. 2016, it was 40. And in this year's proposed budget, it's minus 40. Are we losing an ELL supervisor?
Go ahead. We don't have an ELL supervisor. We haven't had one since, well, you could speak to it.
So please tell me the dynamics of our ELL program, because I know that was an issue 2 years ago, and could just...
Thank you. When I came here in 2011, we were about to lose our funding in ELL. The state said that we were not only non-compliant, but we weren't answering any of their queries and refusing to meet with them. I began to meet with them over a period of time. They gave us extensions to meet the guidelines of what they had mandated. And if you remember, Tom, this school committee, and you were on it, as many of you were, voted an ELL director to meet the mandates of what the state had determined we needed. We began to build an ELL program for our kids at that time, including teachers and curriculum, and the state, at the end of that year, took us off the list of bad guys and said that basically we were moving in the right direction. The following year, I believe, our ELL director, I had left, obviously, and I believe that the new ELL director left the following year, is that right? And she went to the state, I believe. And the ELL director was then replaced with someone who eventually left and was not replaced. I believe the person to my right took over the job as ELL director, as she did 30 or 40 other things, and kept that program running. And I believe that this school committee, along with the mayor, funded a number of positions that improved the quality of the ELL program, and the ELL program has become a model, believe it or not, in 5 years, has become a model that the state actually sends people down to look at because of the performance of our kids. Which is really a feather in all of your caps who have been here to make that program happen. And of course, nobody more than this gal deserves the credit for making that happen, because she just took on the role when she knew it needed to be done. So that is where we are now. We have no particular ELL director. Anything that needs to be done in ELL, including a liaison to the state, is done through Kara's office. We no longer pay a director, and we have saved that money for the last couple of years.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Another question I have is on page 7, library media salaries. I see that that's gone down by 26,000, but I know that you're adding the position of the technology specialist. Do you envision that role being similar, or how did that line item change?
That I'm not so sure of.
7. So in 16, it was funded at 78,000. In 17, it's 51,000 with a net loss of 26.
Cost savings. Sorry. It was a new hire, and there was cost savings, high out, low in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I know there's a couple other people we're going to go to. I want to try to stay on schedule because we have a number of people here for the meeting at 7:30. So I have Mr. Hockman and Mr. Amico, and then I think we try to wrap up at that point. I know we have another meeting scheduled. So Mr. Hockman, I'll go to you, then to Mr. Amico, and then if there's no objections, we can wrap up and go to the regular agenda. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. Some of the conversation that's taken place tonight is making me somewhat uncomfortable relative to this building access attendant and some technology that is going to get utilized to either grant or deny people access to the Higgins Middle School. This is the first I'm hearing of it, and I would respectfully request of the mayor an executive session to discuss that safety protocol. I'm not quite sure what it is or how it's implemented, and I don't know a person who we're authorizing to make those determinations, and I'm just unsure, so I'd like some more information, and I think the appropriate place for that is an executive session at some point. And then my only other point is, I don't disagree that I'd like to see the culinary program enhanced to the Higgins Middle School, and whether or not that's going to be a mandate, you know, I understand the exploratory rotation that Mr. Busey has put in place, and it certainly has enhanced the curriculum and learning taking place at the middle school. But if we're talking about adding a culinary program at the middle school, as opposed to maybe an assistant director of special education, which is on the C list, or a curriculum coordinator for K-12, when we all know how much Ms. Murtagh does to alleviate some of her plate, I just don't, or school adjustment counselors, as Ms. Carpenter has advocated for. I just frankly put those in a higher priority at this point. We're limited, or at least we're expected to be limited to live within a budget. Not quite sure how that actually plays out, but we're expected to live within a budget and the limitations that exist there. I just wouldn't prioritize a culinary teacher or an exploratory above. I could probably rattle off 20 or 30 other things. We need IEP team chairs who are dramatically overworked. We could use a tremendous amount of more support staff in the special education department. I mean, there's just, I can go on and on about all the other places that I think this district is better suited to spend $65,000. That was my only point.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mr. Amico?
Through the chair to Dr. Levine and the committee, I wanted to get back to what Ms. Carpenter had mentioned about the school adjustment counselors, and we put principals in position of leadership to run buildings. They know their buildings better than we do, and they know their students a lot more than we do, and they're seeing the problems, they're seeing the social problems, they're seeing the problems with addiction. So I just echo what she said. As far as I'm concerned, we can't have enough school adjustment counselors in our buildings to help the principals and the teachers, and obviously the students and their families. So I just wanted to end with that. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no objection, I'd like to wrap up our budget session. I know we have another one scheduled for next week, 17th. Okay, and we'll take a quick couple minute break, and then we'll start up with the regular agenda. Mr. Hockman, did you have a question?
We need a motion to recess.
Motion to recess, yep, exactly.
Motion to recess. So we'll take a 2-minute break. Thank you.